Rather than any regrets that you have now, that someone has now, just look back on them, on your old self with compassion. Instead of carrying that weight of regret and saying, I've made so many mistakes, I've done this wrong, I've done that wrong. Actually just look back and think, you did the best you were as who you were then. And the fact that you can look back with regret and realise you've made a mistake means you have evolved from that person into who you are now.
Welcome to the Wealth Faculty. Jason Witten here. Wherever you are in the world, I hope you're really doing well. Today's conversation landed for me personally with a lady called Bronnie Ware. She wrote the book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, and we dived into that book today. The fastest translated book in Hay House history, faster than Deepak Chopra, faster than Wayne Dyer. What an amazing conversation we had, peeling through those layers. We went deep. I do hope you enjoy this conversation with Bronnie Ware. Bronnie Ware, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you.
Awesome to have you here, and it's been nice to chat to you off air a little bit about our country beginnings.
I know, we're both country kids.
Yeah, you're a Tamworth girl.
Yes.
Charters Towers for me, and you know what we've got in common there?
What's that?
Country music.
Country music, yeah, great.
Tamworth #1 Country Music Festival, Charters Towers #2 Country Music Festival in Australia.
Of course, I was actually going to say lack of rain, but
it's probably true too.
But yeah, country music's much better.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, for those listeners listening in today, I just want to kick off and lay the scene for those listening who don't know of you.
Yes.
You've written a very amazing book, The 5 Regrets of the Dying, and you were telling me off air that it got rejected by publishers how many times?
25.
25 times.
Yes.
Did you know what it reminded me of? Kentucky Fried Chicken. What's that guy again? Colonel Sanders getting rejected 1,000 times, and then he gets the recipe, and it sounded like your book like that. Was you self-published the book?
Yeah. After that, I just thought, oh well, stuff it. I'll put it out myself. I was an independent singer-songwriter at the time.
Country music.
Oh, sort of folky country. Crossing over, there's a few hillbilly songs in there.
Yeah.
And so I put the 5 Regrets out independently, and then it just kept gaining momentum until eventually my dream publishing house actually came to me and offered me a deal, which was a really fabulous turn of events.
And that was Hay House.
Yes.
Hay House picked the book up and published it for you, and it got, if I'm accurate here, it's the fastest re-languaged published book.
Foreign rights seller in Hay House history.
History, well, awesome.
It's in 32 languages. The most recent one is in Russian.
Wow.
It's even in Mongolian. And
Is that right?
It has a movie in the pipeline now. And
that is super cool.
It's been a heck of a journey.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of millions of copies of the book worldwide.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. And what a message to send out too, you know. And so for those listening in, can we just sort of have a little look about, how this came about? You were a palliative care nurse for 8 odd years.
Yeah, a carer, not a nurse.
A carer.
Yeah,
okay,
unqualified carer.
Yeah.
Just someone with a lot of heart looking for a live-in job.
Yes.
Stumbled into palliative care.
And how did you get into that? You were sort of working in a job in a previous life as a bank teller.
Yeah, I was in banking or bank manager actually.
Bank manager.
Yeah. I just wanted a job with heart, a job without makeup, without high heels and without a uniform, but mostly a job with heart. And I'd done the Aussie thing and gone backpacking over to England and then other places from there. And I'd done a live-in caring role there, but it was more as a companion. I was actually on a farm as well in England.
For someone older?
Yes, yeah. And so the family were nearby in another house on the farm. So I was really just a companion who had to chill out and watch Oprah every afternoon with their mum and stuff. And so when I came back to Australia, I went back into banking, but it was just not fulfilling me at all. And I was starting to venture down the creative path with a little bit of writing of quotes and nature photography. And then I stumbled into songwriting, which was always really going to happen. It was in my genes anyway.
Yeah.
And I was really just looking for something with heart. And I took a live-in job as a carer so that I didn't have to pay any rent, so I could focus on my creative stuff.
So you'd given up the banking world.
Yes.
You said, that's it, I'm not going to do this anymore.
Yeah, the pain of it just became unbearable.
Yeah.
And pain is a good motivator.
Yes,
and
away from or towards sometimes.
That's right,
Sometimes the away from's better. Yeah.
That's right. And after a few years overseas and then coming back and stepping back into my old life pretty much, just in a different town, it was like, okay, well, I'm a different person. Why am I trying to fit back into the same life that I'd left behind? And so, I just kept doing a lot of work on myself and sending out a lot of prayers for something with heart. And then I took this live-in job thinking it was just a companionship.
Mm-hmm.
And then my first patient actually became palliative within a short time. She'd been sent home from hospital and they said she could only come home providing she had a carer. And so I was that carer. I was employed through an agency as her carer.
Okay.
And there weren't many people willing to do live-in, so that I got the job so easily. And so I moved in with her, but she didn't improve. Her health didn't improve. So then the doctors came in and they did more tests, and then it became obvious that she was actually dying. And so the family asked would I stay on because her and I had formed an instant connection,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and I did. And after she died, the agency I was working with said I handled it well. Did I want to do more work in palliative? So I said, sure, okay, I guess, because I didn't know what that job with heart was going to look like.
Right.
So when it presented itself in front of me, I figured I wouldn't have been called to it if I couldn't do it. So I just prayed for a lot of strength to get on with it. I'd only ever seen sheep dying before then, or cattle, and so that led into 8 years of looking after dying people.
Wow! And was there a time there? Was there a moment where you realised that this was a calling for you at this point? This was a chapter that you needed to do, or was that something that slowly dawned on you?
I think it was a slow dawning. I knew I was good at it. In the sense that the patients were at ease with me straight away. So I knew I had a calming effect on them, especially if they were going through a lot of anguish or fear about having been diagnosed as palliative or, terminal, that they were actually dying. So I knew that there was a part of my nature that was good for them. But I still saw it for quite a few years as just something that was funding my singer-songwriting path, even though I hated performing in pubs, and I was doing that at the same time.
Okay.
And going out and doing songwriter nights and open mic nights, and just hated that world of pubs and being on stage at 10 o'clock at night. People watching the boxing on TV or whatever. And so I still just saw it as a job I loved and that I was good at, but I never imagined in a million years that my creative path and that work were actually lining up to come together. I saw it as a very separate part of my life. It was my income and it was work I loved, but my creative path was the work I was trying to make happen.
Yes.
And then as life
does.
it brought the two together.
Yeah, it's an interesting one that, a lot of people that I, converse with often think that it's like in Hollywood, we have this aha moment, everything, you can hear the trumpets in the hills and the light, the sun comes out and whatever. But, for many people, it is that slow but steady burn or build of something. This is meaningful, or potentially we learn to make a meaning out of it that is actually powerful for ourselves, or a bit of a combination of both.
Yes. And that's pretty much what happened.
Yeah. Well, we were chatting just before we jumped online that or on air that taboo subject. Talking about people dying, and we were talking about the same sort of thing. What's the things you shouldn't talk about? Money, sex, politics, dying, like these things that they should be talked about, important stuff. And so, obviously that sort of bubbled away at you inside. When did it become obvious that you wanted to share the things that you were learning in this role, for you?
Well, I was keeping a journal all the way through, but that was more for my own healing, because when you're looking after dying people, you've got to be in the room with them, but they're sleeping most of the time.
Yes.
So I was either meditating or reading or writing.
Yep.
And so I was keeping a journal, and I just started seeing a lot of similar themes, and that was helping my own life. At that point, I hadn't realised it would ever be shared publicly. But there are a couple of patients I had whose regrets were so huge that they actually said, I remember one instance where an elderly man said to me, whatever you do, don't let my mistakes become your mistakes,
Yes.
and don't let anyone you love have the same mistakes. Like, share my mistakes onward. And that was a real turning point for me, where I sort of thought, okay, I need to speak more about this, if only in my inner circles initially.
Yep.
And then when I started burning out from the dying people after 8 years.
I was going to ask about that, yeah.
Yeah, I started just really, I wanted to work where there was some hope.
Yeah.
And so I managed to secure some funding and set up a songwriting program in a women's jail. And so I started teaching songwriting and guitar in a women's jail.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty random, actually, because I'd never been inside a jail or anything like that. But I thought there'd be some hope there, and I wanted to align my income with my music.
Yes.
Which is where I thought I was heading. And it was through that I was talking. I was at a folk festival out at Gulgong in New South Wales.
Yeah.
Gulgong Folk
yeah.
Festival.
Yeah.
I played there over New Year, and an editor of a magazine got chatting to me about the program in the jail and said, write me a story about it and I'll put it in our magazine, just a little folk magazine.
Yeah.
And so when I wrote that story, I thought, why aren't I writing more? I love writing. I always had pen friends as a kid, and I was really getting tired of slogging it out in the music scene. I was pretty isolated in myself as well at the time.
Uh-huh.
So it was quite a confronting thing to just not talk to anyone for a week and then turn up on stage and play. And it was hard. But I still did it because I had this calling to share my message and my own learning and the message of the dying. And so I just thought I'll start a blog, and didn't know what to write. I even Googled good blog topics, and it came up with so many ridiculous things that were just so not aligned with my values. And things like, some Hollywood person was wearing purple tights that day, like really ridiculous
stuff.
Yeah. And so I just sat there watching the birds fly around, and then I just got this very strong inner guidance, just write what you know. And I thought, okay, well, I know about the regrets of the dying. And so that's what I did. I put it down into a blog and then just kept writing my blog and letting that evolve. And then about 6 months later, the blog actually exploded and turned into the book.
Went viral.
Yeah, because I realised that it's a subject that has been taboo, but it's a subject that people were ready for.
Yeah, and certainly I think, the word regret, is a very powerful one if we use it in the right way, because you don't want to have those regrets. And most people cognitively, understand the word, but not necessarily drill home actually the action around those things. And, the 5 steps or the 5 regrets, super powerful. And maybe before we sort of go on through, maybe we can just talk about each one for a couple of minutes, some realizations in those, because for me, certainly right now, I was sharing with you, my father is quite ill, and we're sort of looking after him, and sort of this is kind of almost timely. It was amazing to
as it happens.
As the universe aligns to be able to have this conversation with you. I really do appreciate it. But, can you just take us through, these regrets, sort of, start with the first one, as I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself and not life others expect of me. Yeah,
so that came from all different sorts of angles, but it's just people realising that they had let society and their family and the general culture of their country, their friends, their neighbours, and the opinions of all of those actually affect the way they lived their life instead of living according to how they wanted to live.
Yeah.
And it was heartbreaking, absolutely heart-wrenching to see the pain and the anguish that people went through when they realised, hang on, I've lived my life according to other people, not according to what I wanted to do. And now my life's over, and the only time I get out of bed is if I'm strong enough to hobble to the toilet, and I can't make any of those changes now. And to actually have to find peace with that is a pretty big task when you're already dealing with your impending death.
Yeah. And were you having these sort of realizations yourself as you were, and how was that affecting your life at the same time? Was there sort of, lights going off everywhere for you?
Well, I started seeing similar themes.
Yes.
And so I started, and also just witnessing how real that anguish and heartbreak was.
Yes.
I thought, whoa, I'm not I'm not going down this road myself. I'm definitely going to make sure I live free of regrets. And so I think a turning point was when one of my patients, Grace, she was one of the first who had that regret.
Yeah.
And she squeezed my, she was only a little tiny lady, but really fierce. And she squeezed my hand really tight and she just said, promise me, Bronnie, promise this dying woman that you will live a life true to yourself and you won't make this same mistake.
Yeah.
And she was bawling at the time. I was crying as well. And I said to her, I promise, Grace, I promise. And so there was sort of that there because of that promise that I was determined to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And perhaps at that point, I probably didn't quite love myself enough or believe in myself enough to have made that decision consciously and honoured it as much as I would have for her.
Yes.
So because I made that promise to her, it started off that way to start with, like, okay, well, I've made a promise to Grace, but obviously over time it's like, hang on, this isn't about a promise to Grace. This is about treating myself with kindness.
Yeah.
And actually making sure I don't end up with these regrets myself. And so it just kept giving me more and more courage. And, I broke some massive dynamics in my life, just shattered family dynamics and stopped playing games with my own mind and really looked at my worth and some of my detrimental habits, and all as a result of that.
Wow.
Yeah.
And would you say, I'm just thinking this as we're sort of having a yarn, would you say, that for me, one of the reasons I want to have my dad with me is because, I don't want him to have to go to somewhere else for care, in those last times.
Yes.
And it's a difficult choice. It's hard either way. And would you say that, potentially some of those lessons that are maybe meant to be passed on at this time for us as a society, maybe, because we have I don't want to say it the easy option, and I don't think it's the easy option. I don't want to say that as the word, but an option that is not maybe the harder one, that sometimes we're missing out on some wisdom or something that is to be passed on at certain times.
Are you meaning alternatively to put them into care and actually have them at home and be with them through the whole process?
Yeah. What would your sort of view on that be?
It's so beneficial to our growth and to the love of the family and to or the love of friends or whatever. It is so beneficial to be with someone right through their dying process rather than just shut the door on it.
Yeah.
It's really scary for dying people to just be isolated and without family or without loved ones, without people they love. But more so, as a culture, we're just sweeping death, putting it behind curtains and sweeping it under the carpet. And it's like, well, we're going to die. About time we started talking about this.
It's part of life, right? It's the circle of life.
Yes, it is, And the more that we can bring it out into the open, the more we realise how sacred our time actually is.
Beautiful.
So rather than living through life in denial, like one day I'll do this, one day I'll do that, one day I'll do that.
Yeah.
Instead it's like, holy dooly, okay, every single day I wake up is one day less of my life.
Yes.
The clock is ticking. But rather than see that as shocking or crippling, see it as empowering, like, okay, my time is valuable. I'm going to stop all this nonsense and stop living for other people.
Yes.
I'm going to start realising my heart is telling me to do this. I'm going to find the courage to do it, and I'm just going to do it because I don't want to be lying on my deathbed with regrets.
Yeah.
And I'm witnessing like in your case, I'm witnessing my dad dying. I'm getting a bit of a feel of what it's like to be dying. If I put myself in that position, okay, am I going to be peaceful when I'm lying there?
Yeah.
And if you're heading in the right direction, okay, I'm doing fine. If you're not, like if you're exposed to death more and more, you're going to imagine your own death and think, oh, okay, time to find some courage and actually step into a different direction.
Certainly. Yeah. What an amazing gift at that point.
Yes.
Yeah. And number two, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. And one of the things in there, you're saying this came from every male patient you were with.
It did. And I mean, this is also a generation where a lot of the women didn't work full time.
Yes, I understand.
So I'm sure that it would apply to both these days. I actually got slammed massively in the Financial Times in London for that, for that quote. And it was like, oh, don't shoot the messenger here, mate. Like I'm not the one, I didn't make this stuff up. I actually witnessed the pain of it.
Yes.
So what it was people realizing that that they had allowed their identity around their work to become everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so when their work was taken away from them, they really had no
who are they? Like
no sense of self, no communication channels with their families, no permission from themselves to actually go out and have a good time, or no networks to have a good time with. And it's all well and good to love your work. I love my work, and it's not about not loving your work. It's about leaving some space for other areas. So if your work is taken away from you, that you still actually have a fulfilling life.
Yeah.
Without it, I mean, look at this year with how many people have lost their identity through their work because of COVID and everything else, and the carpet's been pulled out. But if you've got other areas that you've been focusing on in wellness or socially or relationships, whatever, then there's still, you don't lose everything. You don't lose your whole sense of self. And that was really painful for a lot of people I looked after, because once they were too sick to work, it was like, well, who am I?
Yeah.
What have I got left? Who am I now?
Yeah. And there is a disturbing statistic that, men retire and they on average die like 6 years after they stop working.
And that's why.
Yeah. And, who am I? What do I do? Our good friend Marcus Pierce has got some very interesting conversations around, the 100 Not Out podcast that he does, and about the oldest people in the world. And,
they were having fun. They weren't working all the time.
Fun and having, and having fun with great people around them, relationships.
That's right. That's right. Well, we can all learn from Mark.
Absolutely. We love him. We love him. Listen, and that one lands for me, certainly my dad, physical hard worker his whole entire life. He never graduated school. He didn't even go to primary school, and his whole body on the line for his life and his family. And certainly, I see him now, he's struggling with that, and that sort of lands for me. And I think, and that's one of the reasons I wanted my parents to be with me when I've got kids, because I had my nan and my pop quite close, like we lived literally around the corner in a small town. So that was a gift, I think, when I look back, and I believe it's a gift now for my kids as well, and also myself. So, even though I'm going to have a chat with him, but I think there's a few things we've got to have a chat about before it's too late. Yeah, I'm inspired.
Even if it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, people find courage to talk about some hard topics when they know that they're probably, it's probably one of the greatest acts of love they can do is to have those conversations with you.
And I've been talking to people about money for 20 years, and there has not been a conversation that I've had with a genuine human that hasn't said, I would like a bit more money because I want to look after the people that I love. It's so powerful, and whichever way you come at that, sometimes you've got to sort of balance it out. Yes, money is important, but the time and the relationships you have probably trump that a little bit more than being at the office or working hard all the time.
It's finding that, and I don't know
finding that balance point. It's probably not a thing. I don't know if balance is actually a thing. So sometimes you got. I think I was actually chatting the other day. Sometimes you got to be out of balance and know you're out of balance, but you're happy to go back the other way at some point.
That's exactly right. I was going to say exactly the same. I don't think there's ever a point where you say, oh, that's balanced and now I can live happily ever after. It's so fluid, but it's always checking back in and saying, oh, hang on, I am out of balance. Let me get
consciousness
back.
of it.
Mindfulness.
Yeah, very powerful. And then number 3, I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. Was that again a male thing, or was it across
both.
the board? Really?
Both.
Okay.
And it came from 2 different angles, though.
Okay.
A lot of different people, but from 2 main angles.
Yes.
One was, I guess, where you're thinking the male lack of expression, where there were patients who wished they'd had the open communication with their family. So there was one elderly man I looked after. He was in his 90s. I think he was 91 or 92, and he couldn't even tell his family he was proud of them, or his kids he was proud of them, or speak about so many important things that he wanted to. It just felt like too much effort for him to find a way to open the conversation. And so there were those sort of things where people wanted to be able to say, I love you, or like share feelings of endearment.
Yeah.
But there were also the other side of the coin. There was also the other side of the coin where people were saying, I wish I'd expressed my feelings and stood up for myself.
Yes.
In own, self-care and self-love, in saying, I wish I hadn't let that person dominate me so much. I wish I had expressed my feelings and said, I can't put up with this, or I don't like the way you've treated me all my life, or whatever. So the regret came from different angles there, and both equally painful and powerful.
Yes, very powerful. And, what a message. I think I read a quote the other day, sort of, you get to 50 and then it's the, I don't care decade, if you know what I mean.
Know, it's wonderful. Yeah. I'm in my 50s, so I can easily say I agree with that one.
I don't care what you think.
It's so freeing. Yeah.
And it's kind of nice maybe to try and bring that time frame a bit sooner. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It is possible.
Yes.
It is by facing the fact that your time is limited and are you living it the way you want to, or are you living it for someone else?
To someone else, yeah. Like unbelievably powerful. I wish I'd stayed in touch with my friends. I'm quite guilty of this one. Yeah.
Well, this is before social media, so perhaps that won't be quite so strong in years to come. I don't know. But what it was when people are dying, they want to live until they're dead. And a lot of them really wanted to reminisce about the good old days and have reflections and giggles and laughter and stuff. And often the family is in a bit of a state of grief even before the person's dying. And so they're already feeling the guilt of the pain their impending death is causing their adult children or their grandkids and stuff. And so rather than always be in that mode of being the parent caretaker, worried about the family going through their emotional pain, when friends are there, they can actually just be an individual, not a parent. And so then they get to have those funny stories and the reminiscing, and there's not the guilt of dying or the concern for the family. It's just, friends bring so much joy to dying people, and sometimes, quite often, people couldn't find those friends that they were craving to see just before they died. And so there were really awful, heartbreaking scenes where people are saying, if I could have only reached her, or if I could have only found him to say goodbye or share a story or whatever. Yeah. And just having to accept that there was absolutely nothing they could do, because I share a story in there where there were times when I've tried to find people, and sometimes I was successful and sometimes I wasn't. And this is going back through the white pages and the electoral roll and things like that, like manually going into, the post office and searching through the big white Sydney white pages and stuff like that for them. Yeah. So, and it was awful just knowing, okay, well, that person's actually already died. Yeah. Or that person may or may not be alive, but I've got no idea where they are. And, it's friends are really important at that time of life. Yeah. And at any time.
I was going to say at any time, and just sort of sitting here, one of the things, being a quote unquote busy person, I don't have time for that or whatever it might be, and I'm quite sure, a lot of people look back and say, well, I should have made a little bit of time, or maybe the time that you spend somewhere is like, probably. That was not very good time invested in that sort of activity or somewhere else.
Yeah, like is half an hour on Facebook, scrolling on Facebook or Instagram or something, really as rewarding as instead of sending someone a text saying, I'm thinking of you, mate, actually just picking up the phone and saying, just a quick call, been thinking of you, what's going on in your life? Yeah. Half an hour later, you've hung up, you're both full and happy, and your screen time review for the week goes down.
Beautiful. You're winning in reverse. Yeah. I like it. Yeah. And then the fifth one, I wish I'd let myself be happier. What was that one about?
Well, it was people realising that it's a choice, that even though life is hard, so there are a couple of angles again, Jason. So sometimes it was because people's self-worth was shaped by the opinions of others.
Gotcha.
So they didn't believe they deserved a happy life and a good life or to be happy. So they let the power and the opinions of other people shape their sense of self. And so they didn't choose happiness because on many levels, they didn't believe they deserved it. But then on the other side, the choosing happiness, I had some beautiful conversations around this where people realised that there'll always be challenges and we'll always make mistakes. That's how we learn as humans. We make mistakes. But even in between all the hard stuff, you can still choose to focus on something else for a moment or for a day. Or so if you're going through the worst time ever, and then you say, actually, I'm going to step out of this. I don't know. I haven't found my solution yet. I'm not going to work on it full on today because I'm just banging my head against a wall and it's drowning me. I'm drowning in all of this. I don't know what to do. I'm scared, but I'm going to just take a day off. I'm going to choose happiness today. I'm going to just go and have a day off doing something nice for myself. And that problem will still be waiting for me tomorrow. I'll come back to it tomorrow. And so it's those sort of things, just choosing. And you come back to it tomorrow and you've got a clearer head and you haven't wasted a day of your life in treading water again in a problem that you haven't found a solution for yet.
Yeah.
And so it's just realising that you can't be happy all the time, but if you're in amongst a hard time or a sad time, can you stop and actually look at the sky for 1 minute and think, oh, look at that.
Beautiful.
I live where the sky's so clean it's still blue.
Yeah.
Or I can hear someone laughing. Isn't that nice that someone in the world's happy? Or, I don't have to walk a mile with a bucket on my head to get some fresh water.
Yes.
Stuff like that. And so it's just, they're small things, but they have a huge amount of power. And this is what my patients were realising, that, oh my goodness, I was so focused on the challenges and the hard stuff or the goals and everything else that I didn't actually stop sometimes and choose happiness in that moment.
Yeah. But powerful 5.
Yes.
Powerful 5. And
who'd have thought?
Yeah. and for anyone at any time to just to think about and, and do those things. What would you say? What advice would you give to, let's say, me?
Okay.
Or the families of people who are in that zone in their life? It's it's the last chapter. It's the final song. It might be a year, a month, a day, whatever it is. What would you say to those people? How they can do something. Let it go, be something, act like. What advice would you give to the families and the friends surrounding that person? I mean,
well, I'd say that that listening is probably one of the biggest gifts you can give. Try not to solve too many of their problems because people still want to feel alive and capable for as long as they can.
Yes,
and try, you want to be honest and have those big conversations, but maybe try not to bring too much grief onto them beforehand.
Yes.
I mean, certainly let your feelings out. Let them see that you're sad, and you're going to say with your dad, let him see you cry. I'm not saying that at all, but what I'm saying is let him also see the regular part of you, because they're dealing with their own head and heart all the time. They're dealing with the fact that they're going to die, and day-to-day stuff is really nice for them, just to feel that they're still living and hearing that life is going on, and what you do today. And so don't feel embarrassed that you're still alive and they're dying, and be able to have and just bring them up to date on what's going on outside of their deathbed.
Yeah, because they probably feel a bit isolated.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But include them in that sort of thing, but also be a listener. That's a really big, a really great gift you can give to people.
Yeah.
In any time.
Yeah, totally. Take some time and listen. Hang out.
Yeah.
Good advice. I'm going to take some.
Play cards or something they like to do.
Something they love to do.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, fantastic, powerful messages there, and I'm sure people listening in would be, really sort of taking something on board. I am certainly right now, that's for sure. Thank you. So, your blog went viral, your book went viral, and this all sort of started to happen at a pretty pivotal time in your life as well, wasn't it? So
yeah, it's funny how what timing is.
The universe sends you a bunch of stuff to sort of handle.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the blog was taking off, and every time people asked could they share it, I said yes, as long as you include the link to my book in it. So then the book started taking off, and then the week I was due, so I became a late in life mum. I was very blessed to conceive naturally and quickly at 44. I'd never been a mum before.
Wow.
And so I was 45 when she was due, and then in the week leading into my daughter's birth, the book just took off crazily.
The week before?
Yes, in that week.
There you go.
The Guardian in the UK mentioned it, and it just went from there.
Crazy.
And so I was actually doing lots of interviews, and then it took off even more in the last 24 hours before my daughter was born. So by then I was in hospital and I was in labour, and I was doing interviews while I was in labour.
Really?
Yeah, and it was just horrific. It was, it was sort of exciting, but I really didn't care about my work at that point. So I knew I'd never have another chance ever to be a mum. I was 45. And I wanted to be really fully present for my daughter.
Yes.
And, I'm doing interviews and I'm speaking, and actually I'm on the phone. I actually had to say, can you just hold on a moment, please? And the guy's like, yeah, okay. And I've just,
in the middle of labour.
Yeah. And then I've just come back, sorry, what were you saying? And I've gone on like that, and it was just crazy, absolutely crazy. And the staff at the hospital were getting a bit impatient with me, like, you've got to put the computer away, and all these email interviews are coming in. So I'm thinking, I'll just get this out of the way, because once the baby's here, I won't have time. And so it was about 11 o'clock at night, and I closed the computer and turned off the phone and just sent out a very strong prayer and said, send me help now.
Yeah.
It had taken me 14 years to become an overnight success in terms of trying to get my creative work paying for itself. And, and I was ready to quit, because I thought it's more important for me to be a mum and to be present as a mum.
Yeah.
And but then, my daughter was born, and I still did another interview or two almost straight after birth on emails. And then within 24 hours of her being born, Hay House rang me and offered me a publishing deal.
The book up.
And I just said, sure, but I've got to go. My baby's crying. It's a yes, but I'll call you back. My baby's crying. And he said, oh, how old's your baby? So I just had her. And so, it was incredible to
surreal.
Yes, yeah, and it's just like, oh, thank you. So when I got out of there, I had all these emails that had been sent about inquiring about foreign rights, and I'd been, just putting them in a folder, not knowing, and so I just sent them all straight off to Hay House, and they looked after everything.
Fabulous.
Yes.
That's good.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah. It's one of the parts of, the two functions of the Wealth Faculty, the podcast.
Yes.
Is the people that you surround yourself with. And obviously Hay House has been great for you with that stuff, which is like, being able to, like, I've got a team, can you take care of things?
Yes.
Help me with my my book and my distribution. Having the right people on your team's important. Yeah.
Oh, it's everything.
Yes.
It really is everything.
Yeah. Fantastic. And then shortly after that, becoming a mum for the first time, you had some health issues yourself, rheumatoid arthritis.
Yes, yeah.
And, sort of the highs and lows of this thing,
My goodness, it arrived at the same time, more or less. Once I got out of the hospital, I just started getting some aches, and so then I started off on this journey, and things hadn't worked out with my daughter's dad, so I ended up being a single mum, 45, newborn baby, my work skyrocketing. I was doing interviews back to back through the night in other time zones and everything, and then rheumatoid arthritis on top. And when that first kicks in, it's pretty much like your hands and wrists and your ankles and feet are in boiling vats of boiling oil.
Ooh.
Like that's sort of the intensity of the fire inside of them, and it was just overwhelming. I don't know how I survived or functioned during that time, but it really taught me a lot about self-kindness and boundaries and surrender, learning to surrender my old self, and that I was fit and strong even when I was 3 months pregnant and things had dissolved with my partner. I moved half the furniture on my own. stuck it into a van and onto a trailer. I was walking a fridge.
Bit of your country upbringing.
That's right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
None of this, okay, how about you be kind to yourself and reach out and ask for some help?
Yes.
And so that taught me all of that. It taught me that we need support systems, whether we're well or sick. We need support systems to stay managing our life in a way that's actually kind to ourselves.
Yes.
And so over time I was pretty much forced to surrender into those lessons. But I've come to realise that the biggest challenges we get are given to us from a place of love to bring us into our best self.
Yeah.
They're not actually there to cripple us and curse us, and they're actually there to break the old patterns that don't support us, the patterns of walls around us and expecting too much of ourselves. And it's just taught me self-kindness on levels I never could have grasped any other way.
It sounded like it was intense in a short period of time, these sort of, opportunities for growth and personal development very quickly.
Yeah, I was being cracked open, but I'd done so much work up until that point.
You were ready.
I guess maybe. I was. Yeah. Life just figured I was, I guess. Yeah. And I came out the other side with such a freedom of not caring what other people think, and really healthy boundaries, but not in a defensive way, but actually not in like defensive to other people, but loving to myself to say, no, sorry, I don't actually work on that day, or no, I'm full. And I gave up the word busy and just started saying full.
Yeah. Because
part of being full meant for me to leave space to do the things I love as well. Yeah.
And I suppose just thinking about it, like, it could be,
sorry.
You good?
Yes. Let's just go to the other side.
Bit itchy.
Yeah, right.
No worries. Sorry. Well, just thinking, to me, it could be quite easily, the 5 top tips for the living as well. Before you get to regret them while you're dying.
Yes.
It's sort of almost, you could put it at the front there too in that sort of way for a lot of people, and, think about life in that way.
Yeah. And use it use death as a tool for living.
Yes.
And then say, okay, well, there's some pretty big wisdom in these 5 bullet points.
Yeah.
And obviously in the book I elaborate on the more stories that came from where those 5 points originated from. But yeah, absolutely, it's for living. It's these regrets are here to teach us how to live, not just how to die in peace, but to die free of regrets, but to actually live, to live well.
Live well. And then, your first book was a success, and then you've written 2 more after that, which was some stories, 52 stories?
52. Well, 52. Initially it was going to be 50, but 50 Shades of Grey was coming out at the time.
You didn't want to get confused with that one.
My publisher said, let's just stay clear of 50. And so I said, okay, well, let's make it one a week for 52 weeks.
Yes.
So that's why it's called Your Year for Change. And that was written at a time when I was going through all that with my health, and I was really incapable of writing short stories. And so I sent it out as like the middle child. Off you go, find your own way in the world. I can't really help you here. But funnily enough, it turned out to be the favourite of some of my readers. And only last week I do a little bit of mentoring. And last week a client I was mentoring said he uses that like the Tao Te Ching, that no matter what day he opens it, he finds the answer he's looking for. So that was really nice feedback, because the poor book, it just was like, off you go, honey. I'm a middle child, so I get the middle child thing. Off you go. I'm too busy now to deal with
They get the least attention.
That's right. Find your way.
Find your own way.
Yes.
Yeah. My daughter laments in that way all the time.
Right. Yeah. But the middle kids turn out fine.
They turn out well. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And your book Bloom.
Bloom's a tale of courage, surrender, and breaking through upper limits, which is sort of the journey, not only through my health, but some other challenges I was going through at the time. And it just teaches you how freeing that surrender is, and that we actually need an awful lot of courage to surrender. We need more courage to surrender than we do to act often.
Yes.
Yeah, to actually let go, because surrendering is letting go of control and saying, I don't know what to do next, and I'm going to stop wasting my energy trying to force a solution when I've already given it my best.
Yeah.
And so instead I'm at a point now where I'm actually going to say, I'll hand it over to life and trust where it's going to take me. And it's so incredibly freeing when you actually master that. And
beautiful.
it just lets your life flow in different ways.
There's an energy, whatever your belief system is, there's an energy and a flow you can tap into.
Yes.
You co-create your world.
And it's like life finally says, it takes a huge sigh of relief and says, oh, thank goodness, now I can actually help you. You've stopped trying to control every step of the way. Okay, here's some shortcuts.
Stop hanging on so tight.
Yes, exactly, Jason.
Yeah.
Stop hanging on so tight.
Yeah. I love it. It's a fantastic one. And what would you say for some now who might be in the midst of listening to this and going, oh, gee, this is landing for me. There might be some grits. There might be some of this might be landing a bit close to home. I don't want to know what encouragement would you give them right now, maybe as a kind starting place to sort of discover and be brave and have the courage to maybe.
Well, I think shifting your perspective on regrets. So rather than any regrets that you have now, that someone has now, just look back on them, on your old self with compassion. Instead of carrying that weight of regret and saying, I've made so many mistakes, I've done this wrong, I've done that wrong. Actually just look back and think, you did the best you were as who you were then. And the fact that you can look back with regret and realise you've made a mistake means you have evolved from that person into who you are now.
Yes.
So let the person you are now look back on your old self with loving compassion and say, it's okay. I've learnt from this. I'm not going to keep persecuting myself over this or persecuting my old self. And so heal the old regrets through compassion. But then anything moving forward, rather than see things as regrets, just see them as mistakes, because all regrets are mistakes, but not all mistakes are regrets. And the only difference is our perception of it. So we can look back on something, we're all going to make plenty of mistakes from now till when we die, all of us, and that's how we learn. So if we make the mistakes and then have compassion for our humanity and just say, okay, well, I'm human, I've made a mistake, I've stuffed up, I'm going to try and do better next time, then it's just a mistake. But if it's like, oh, I made a mistake, I'm never going to forgive myself, oh my God, I wish I hadn't done that, and then 5 years' time, oh, my life is crap because I made that mistake back then, you're still carrying it, and it just gets heavier and heavier and heavier. And all it is your own judgment on a mistake you made.
Yes.
And so that's why I say that all regrets are mistakes, because they've all come from a mistake, but they've only turned into a regret because of our judgment on it. So all mistakes don't have to become regrets. They're just mistakes. They're being human. They're learning. That's part of
learn to appreciate them for the lessons that they are.
Yes, and be kind to ourselves and just say, okay, well, maybe I could do better today, but as who I was in that moment on that day, that was the best I could do in that moment.
Yeah. It's something I know that many people would appreciate understanding that, including myself, that's for sure.
We can all learn to be
we can all
kind,
learn,
to ourselves.
Yeah, be kind, love and be kind, seek to understand and take it from there maybe, huh?
It takes you a long way.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So part of my world is helping people with, creating wealth and money and stuff like that. And we were talking as we just jumped on air about some of the people that you were taking care of, had some money, and it was something that was of interest to you. And we were sort of talking about it taboo subjects, and the people with money talked about money all the time. And, could you shed some light on, some of those sort of observations and maybe lessons in and around money and those times as life?
Yeah, well, the people I was looking after were people who had the money to get a private carer in and go home to die. So they weren't in the public system in an uncomfortable hospital bed. They'd gone home and made that choice because they could financially.
Yes.
They'd built their wealth and they could actually say, okay, well, home is where I want to be.
Yes.
But what I started noticing was that all of the people who came to visit, or not all the people, but a lot of the people and a lot of the conversations they had with the dying people were about money. And they just talked freely. Like what I was saying earlier about how dying people want to stay living, some of them would say that people would come in and they'd say, well, what's going on with these, with the market today, or what's going on? And so even though they weren't in that position to be investing themselves by then, they were in their last weeks, they still wanted to know what was going on outside. And so I was an ear in the background to all of these amazing conversations. And I remember one, it was in East Melbourne, and a conversation between this woman and her male visitor, and she said, what are all those people without superannuation going to do, like without money?
Yeah.
How are they going to live? How are they going to live on the pension? How do they think they can actually do this without saving money now and investing? And I was just in the background cleaning in the kitchen or something, and I thought, I love that wealthy people speak about money.
Yes.
And it wasn't long after that one of my best mates said to me, how am I ever going to get rich if no one talks about it? How do we improve our money if no one talks about it?
So true.
I said, well, wealthy people talk about it. That's what I'm observing. And so from then on, I used to just be really courageous and ask questions, even from my dying patients. I'd say, how do you invest your money?
Yes.
And one of them said, buy commercial warehouses. That's all I deal with. Don't buy anything else, just commercial warehouses.
Love it.
She said, you put it in, you fit it out, and that's it. 20-year lease. I mean, obviously this is a different time that we're in now, but she was so happy to tell me. And so I used to ask all of them,
Fantastic.
Where do you invest your money, and how do you invest your money, and what are some of the mistakes you made on your money? And so by speaking about money, it helped me heal my own money story, which certainly needed a lot of healing. And we need to speak about money in the positive way it is, because money gives you choices. It does. It just increases your choices and freedom in life phenomenally. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to sort of hear that, echoed, from your experiences and certainly from my own. It's again another freeing thing when you talk about the things that you potentially might be awkward or nervous or taboo or whatever, and you get them out in a very healthy way, then you start to be able to, heal some challenges that you might have of your own, or grow an understanding, or, really come to appreciate things that you may or may not do, but it's able to be talked about without embarrassment or weirdness or whatever.
And it becomes your language then, so it's not a disconnect either.
Yes.
It's not like this other world that, I don't know anything about that, hence why you don't have it flowing in your life. You actually strengthen the connection with it.
Yeah, super powerful. I think, for me, that's probably one of the things that I've spent, a good 20 years encouraging people to talk about, which is, hey, money's an important thing.
Yes.
It's, I think there's a Zig Ziglar quote. I don't know if you know Zig Ziglar. He's like, money's not everything, but it sure ranks up there pretty close to oxygen. It's like, it's pretty hard to live without it. And, while you shouldn't let it take over and dominate your life, it needs some attention.
It absolutely does. I mean, it's good for your well-being as well, because if you don't have it, you're creating stress in your body and other things like that as well.
Yeah, and and what's landing for me right now, I just feel this in my gut right now, is that I get to, because of the money and the wealth that I've created, and many people who do that, I get to help my dad, maybe have the best last moments of his life.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? And it's powerful. And, a lot of people, might say, money has these other connotations, but, for me, it's about what you can help others with, and resources are pretty useful for changing shitty circumstances sometimes.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, also just to enjoy nature and stuff, you look at where the wealthiest people live, they've all got the best views or the best settings. I mean, that's not greed. That's actually because they can and because it's great for their well-being and that sort of thing. So, there's so many positives. It's just not making it instead of love, like bring it in and as a positive energy that can enhance love, and that includes your own sense of self and the self-love.
Yeah. Powerful conversations, Now, was there any tips for those who said, this is how you get off the merry-go-round. You talked about regrets of, not working too much, or not spending enough time with friends, or prioritising relationships, or whatever. What did they say about, okay, well, this was the regret, but here's how I might have fixed that or dealt with it? Or
a lot of that I've sort of found through my own implementation of of making sure I haven't regretted
didn't have
that
those
I don't
regrets.
go down that road.
Yeah.
So there were tips from the people with regrets, in the sense of, don't let this mistake be the same, and make sure you're more courageous and everything else. But I've just found that it's a step-by-step process. And so rather than think too far ahead all the time, planning's great, but a pivotal moment for me was when I was sitting in the traffic lights in Bondi, and it said, I looked across, and in the window of an art studio it said, "Plans make God laugh." And I thought, I like that. And so I think it's important to have plans, and certainly it's important to have goals.
Yes.
And goals and dreams, but be flexible in how to get there, because often people will sabotage themselves by thinking so far ahead and getting scared of the vision they have and the dream.
Yeah.
Getting scared of how they're actually going to get there, and all these imagined fears come in. But then I'd have to do this, then I'll have to do that. I don't know about this. Where would I find someone who could teach me this? Rather than all of that, in implementing all the changes in my own life to make sure that it is absolutely regret-free and that I'm living my fullest life in unison with my heart, is that I do it as a step-by-step process, and trusting that the next step will reveal itself as I need, and the next person I need to meet will come. And that's where the power of surrender is also very handy, because I've tried and tested it, and I know that as long as we keep working towards our goals and not losing sight of our dreams, but have some flexibility in how to get there, then life does breathe that sigh of relief and say, I'm so glad you're getting out of the way so I can help you here.
Yeah. Be excited about the journey of it as well.
Yes, be present for it.
Yeah,
and with that trust does come presence, where you're not just always chasing, but you're actually there for your life.
Yeah. Beautiful. It's been fantastic to chat with you, Bronnie. I always ask this question of my guests, and it's the final one for today. But what's the true meaning of wealth to you?
Choice. Yeah, freedom of choice.
Freedom of choice.
Yes, yeah. That's probably what wealth brings, is freedom of choice. Wealth is to live a life that's true to your own heart and do it in a loving way for the world. That's a pretty good example, I think.
Beautiful. Bronnie Ware, thanks for joining me on the podcast.
My pleasure, Jason. Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for joining us on The Wealth Faculty. Hope you enjoyed. Make sure you subscribe. Where all good podcasts are found, you can find us there. And if you want to watch it, you can subscribe on YouTube, Positive Mentor TV. And until the next episode, take care. Bye for now.